Thunder boomed in the sky and the traffic light turned red. Helen slammed on the brakes. Her eyes were fixed on the rain-battered windshield. That's when she saw him. A drenched man was trying to shield a child under a piece of cardboard. His face. It was impossible. 25 years, and still she would recognize those eyes anywhere. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. Dad! Before we dive into this story, leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're tuning in from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. New York City traffic was gridlocked on Fifth Avenue. Horns blared into the night. The dashboard clock read 11:42 p.m. Helen Vance, 42, CEO of Thorn Group, pressed the button that lowered the power window. Rain spattered her face. The man turned his head toward her. It felt like a punch to the gut. It was him. Their eyes met. A flash of recognition crossed his face, aged, worn, marked by life on the streets. The little girl beside him held his hand, her eyes wide with fear in the rain. The light turned green, but Helen didn't move the car. "Get in," she commanded, automatically opening the rear door. The man hesitated. He looked at Mia, then at Helen. Cars behind them honked furiously. The rain fell like sharp spears. "Please," Helen added, a word she rarely used. The man pushed his makeshift cart to the side of the sidewalk, covered it with a torn tarp, and guided Mia into the car. Helen caught the strong smell of dampness, of the street, of real life entering her $500,000 BMW. "Let's go," she accelerated, cutting through traffic with a sudden maneuver. In her rearview mirror, she watched the man she once called Dad. The same strong nose, the same lined forehead, the same gaze that seemed to see beyond appearances, now covered by a grey, disheveled beard. The silence inside the car weighed like concrete. The only sound was the windshield wipers battling the storm and the shallow breathing of the little girl, who couldn't have been more than 7. "Where are we going?" His voice, deeper than she remembered, finally broke the silence. "Somewhere safe," Helen replied, her eyes fixed on the flooded street. She picked up her cell phone and dialed George, her personal assistant for over 10 years. "The house in Greenwich Heights. I need it ready in 20 minutes. It wasn't a request, it was an order." George didn't question it. The car cut through the night on the West Side Highway, leaving the city's illuminated downtown behind. Helen drove like someone fleeing, or like someone in pursuit. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt her chest. 25 years. 25 years since her mother told her he had abandoned them, that he had run off with another woman, leaving them drowning in debt. 25 years of building hatred for a ghost who now breathed in the back seat of her car. "My name is Robert," he said suddenly, "and this is Mia." The little girl shrank further into the seat, clutching a worn backpack. Helen nodded, unable to say she knew exactly who he was, unable to say that his name, Robert Vance, was the only thing she hadn't erased from memory, even when she tried. 20 minutes later, the car pulled through the automatic gates of an elegant house in a gated community in Greenwich Heights, a modern build hidden among tall trees with a spacious porch and floor-to-ceiling windows. A place Helen maintained but almost never visited, an empty space in her life full of accomplishments. "You can stay here," Helen said, parking the car. The rain was now just a persistent drizzle. "There's food, clean clothes, everything you need." Robert stared at her for a long moment. "Thank you, Helen." The way he said her name made her body freeze. There was no surprise. He had recognized her immediately, just as she had him. "How do you know my name?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "I never forgot you, my daughter." The word daughter hit Helen like a shot. She abruptly opened the car door, needing air. "We'll talk tomorrow," she cut in, handing him the house key. "I need to go." "Will you come back?" Mia's thin voice emerged for the first time, surprising Helen. She hesitated, looking at Mia, a small, fragile child, with her father's same eyes, the same eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. "I will," she replied, surprised by her own certainty. On the way back to her penthouse apartment in the Upper East Side, Helen felt as if she were driving on autopilot. Images of her drenched father, the frightened little girl, the eyes that had recognized her immediately, swirled in her head like a hurricane. Inside the mirrored elevator that carried her to the top floor, she observed her own reflection. An impeccable Chanel suit even at 11 p.m., hair perfectly pulled back in a severe bun, makeup intact despite the rain, a successful woman, a powerful woman. A woman built on a lie. Your father abandoned us, Helen. He chose another woman. He left us destitute. Her mother's words, repeated like a mantra throughout her childhood, now sounded different, because that man destroyed by life whom she had just found, didn't seem like someone who had chosen abandonment. He seemed like someone life had abandoned. Helen tossed her designer handbag onto the marble counter and opened a bottle of red wine. She drank the first glass almost in one gulp. Then she let the tears come. The first in 5 years since her mother's funeral. That night, she didn't sleep. When the sun rose, she was already dressed for battle. A pinstripe suit, high heels, red lipstick, full armor to face the truth. She sent a simple email to her vice president. Take over today's meetings. Unavoidable personal matter. In 14 years at the helm of Thorn Group, she had never written anything like it. The drive to Greenwich Heights had never seemed so long. Helen was now driving a more discreet BMW, without the company logo. The morning was clear after the storm, as if the city had been washed clean of all its sins. When she arrived, she found Robert sitting on the porch, alone. For a second of panic, Helen thought he had left again, taking Mia. But then she saw Mia running through the garden, chasing a butterfly. "Good morning," Robert said, standing up. He was wearing clean clothes she kept in the house for occasional visitors. He still looked out of place, but there was a dignity about him that disarmed her. Helen nodded, sitting in the chair beside him. She watched Mia playing, as carefree as Helen herself had never managed to be. "Why were you on the streets yesterday?" she asked directly. Robert took a deep breath. "It's a long story." "I have all day," Helen replied, surprising herself. Robert looked at her with a mixture of astonishment and resignation. Helen Vance, the CEO who ran an empire with an iron fist, never had time. She was notorious for her impeccable schedule, where every minute was filled with relentless efficiency. "I lost my job a year ago when the factory where I worked closed down," he began, his voice neutral without self-pity. "I tried other jobs, but New York City's relentless with men nearing 60 without a college degree. Our savings ran out, then came the eviction. We tried to stay with acquaintances, but with a small child, it's different. People get scared. They think it's too much trouble." Helen listened in silence. His every word weighed like lead. "Mia's mother abandoned us when she was 2. She said she wasn't cut out to be a mother. Since then, it's just been the 2 of us." Helen looked at Mia, now crouching, observing something on the ground. Dark hair like her own, fair skin like her own. A smaller version of herself, in another life. "And before that?" she asked, her voice softer. "Where have you been all these years?" Robert stared at her, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made her look away. "You really don't know?" The question held a genuine surprise that disconcerted Helen. "I know what my mother told me. That you abandoned us when the company went bankrupt. That you ran off with another woman." Robert closed his eyes, as if each word were a physical stab. "Your mother was always creative with the truth," he said finally, with a sadness that seemed old and familiar. Helen felt her face flush. "Don't talk about her like that." My mother rebuilt everything from scratch after you left. She transformed a small, failing trucking company into a conglomerate with billions in revenue. Robert nodded, without contesting. Yes, she did that. Martha was always brilliant in business. Unstoppable when she wanted something. There was a bitterness in his words that made Helen feel defensive. So don't deny that you abandoned us. She attacked, louder than she intended. That's not how it happened, Helen. He simply replied. But I don't expect you to believe me now, after all this time. Then how did it happen? Robert looked at Mia, ensuring she was still playing far off. Out of earshot. The company was in trouble, it's true. We had debts. An influential politician offered a deal that would save the business. He'd inject capital, but in return we'd have to transport certain goods without asking questions and falsify some tax documents. Helen frowned. This wasn't part of the story she knew. Your mother wanted to accept. I refused. It was our first big fight. Then a buyout offer came in from a foreign group. Fair price, job retention. I thought it was our salvation. Martha saw it as a defeat. Robert paused, running a hand through his greying hair. The final argument was brutal. Your mother gave me an ultimatum. Either we accepted the politician's proposal or everything ended. Our marriage, our family, everything. I didn't give in. Helen felt her heart race. That couldn't be true. It couldn't be so different from what she had believed her entire life. The next morning, my bags were at the door. Security guards prevented me from entering the office. A lawyer handed me divorce papers and a restraining order, alleging threats I never made. Robert looked directly at Helen, and the pain in his eyes was so raw she almost couldn't meet his gaze. I tried to see you. God knows I tried. But the school had orders not to let me near. Your mother told everyone I had threatened you, that I was dangerous. I hired lawyers, spent every penny I had. But Martha had connections. The judge was a family friend of hers. I lost at every level. Helen felt her throat tighten. You saying my mother lied? That she made it all up? I'm saying she recreated the story in a way that suited her, Robert replied. Your mother was always a determined woman, relentless when she set her mind to something. And she had decided to keep the company, to keep you, all to herself. Mia ran up to them at that moment, breathless, her small hands dirty with soil. Dad, I found a cricket. It's green, really green. Robert smiled at his daughter, a smile that transformed his tired face into something luminous. Is that right, Princess? How amazing. Have you named him yet? I'm going to call him Hopper, Mia said, laughing. Good name, Robert replied. Now, how about we wash those hands? It's almost lunchtime. Mia ran inside. Helen observed the interaction, feeling a pang of something she took a moment to recognize, envy, for a simplicity she had never known. It's hard to believe, she said finally, that she could invent something like that I could have lived a lie for so many years. Robert shrugged, a gesture that seemed to say, that's life. I don't expect you to just take my word for it, Helen. It would be unfair after all this time. How can I know the truth? Maybe you can't. Some things are lost forever. Helen stood up abruptly. That's not how things worked in her world. In her world, everything had a solution. Everything could be investigated, verified, proven. I need to go, she said, feeling suffocated. You can stay here as long as you need. Will you come back? Robert asked, and there was a vulnerability in his voice that struck her deeply. I will, she replied without hesitation. In the car, Helen dialed a number she rarely used. Luke, a private investigator she occasionally hired to look into competitors or dubious business partners. I need everything on Robert Vance, my father. Employment records, residences, financial status for the past 25 years. If he was ever arrested, sued, anything. And I need everything on his divorce from my mother. I want the truth, Luke, the complete truth." Next, she drove to the cemetery where Martha Thorne was buried. The mausoleum was imposing, all white marble, with the family name engraved in gold letters. Helen stood before her mother's tombstone, feeling torn between the anger and love she had always felt for that indomitable woman. "Is it true, Mom?" she asked the silence. "Did you lie about everything?" There was no answer, only the wind in the trees and the heavy silence of the dead. In the days that followed, Helen dove into an obsessive investigation of her own past. In the mornings, she visited Robert and Mia, still cautious, still unable to call that man Dad, but increasingly open to listening. In the afternoons, she received reports from the detective, old documents, court records, pieces of a puzzle that slowly formed a completely different picture from the one she knew. And then, a week later, the truth came. Unquestionable, brutal. Documents proving that Robert had indeed refused the corrupt politician's proposal, who would later become a close business partner of Martha's. The restraining order based on false testimonies from employees who, years later, admitted to lying under pressure from their then boss. And the most painful part, letters, dozens of letters Robert had written to Helen over the years, and which were never delivered. Letters Martha had intercepted and kept in a personal safe, only found now after her death. Helen opened the first letter with trembling hands, her father's handwriting shaky but clear. "My dearest Helen, today marks a month since I last saw your face. I think of you every minute. Yesterday I passed by your school, but I didn't have the courage to approach. The lawyers say it would only worsen my situation. They say I need to be patient, that the truth will come out. But how can I be patient when I can't watch you grow up? When I can't explain that I would never, ever abandon you by choice? Your mother is very angry right now. One day, that anger will pass, and she will understand that you need us both. Until then, know that I love you more than anything in this life, that I dream of the day I can hold you again, your father who loves you infinitely, Robert." The tears came unbidden. Helen read letter after letter, each more painful than the last. Letters for lost birthdays, letters for lonely Christmases, letters telling of ordinary days, of how he still kept her photo in his wallet, of how he had never lost hope. The last letter was dated 15 years ago, as if, after a decade of trying, he had finally given up. That night, Helen couldn't sleep. She went out onto her apartment balcony and watched the city that never slept. New York City pulsed below, indifferent to the human dramas it housed. The next morning, she packed a small bag and drove to the house in Greenwich Heights. When she arrived, she found Robert and Mia in the garden, planting seeds in small makeshift pots. "Can I help?" she asked, approaching them. Robert looked up, surprised by her presence. Mia ran to her, the shyness of the first few days replaced by an unexpected familiarity. "We're planting sunflowers," Mia announced. "Dad said they always look at the sun, even when it's raining." Helen felt something tighten in her chest. She crouched beside Mia, accepting a handful of small, dark seeds. "I read your letters," she said in a low voice to Robert, while Mia was distracted with the pots. "All of them. My mother kept them in a safe. She never gave me any." Robert was motionless for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was choked. "I wrote for years. I thought you didn't want to see me, that you believed." Her version. "I did believe it," Helen admitted. "Until yesterday, I believed every word." Both fell silent, watching Mia, who hummed as she put the seeds in the soil. "I'm sorry," Helen said finally, "for all those lost years, for believing that you abandoned us." Robert shook his head. "It's not your fault. You were a child. Your mother was. Martha was a force of nature. When she wanted something, Nothing could stop her. Why did she do it? The question escaped like a sob. Why lie like that? Robert sighed, looking at the clear sky. Power, perhaps, wounded pride, or maybe she truly believed it was better for you to grow up without a father she considered weak, a father who refused to do what was necessary for success. Helen thought of her mother, of the woman who had raised her to be strong, ambitious, relentless, of the woman who repeated like a mantra that feelings were luxuries the strong couldn't afford. And after that, all those years, how did you end up on the streets? Robert shrugged, a gesture that downplayed the gravity of the situation. Life happens, Helen. I worked many jobs. I did what I could. I met Mia's mother when I was already in my 50s. She was young, beautiful, impulsive. I'd been alone for so long. We got involved. She got pregnant. I thought I'd finally have a family again. But she wasn't ready to be a mother. She lasted 2 years and then disappeared. Helen felt an irrational anger toward that unknown woman who had abandoned a child and a man who already carried too many scars. Since then, it's just been the two of you. Robert nodded. We had a simple but stable life, a small apartment, my factory job, until the closure came. At 57, nobody wants to hire you. I tried odd jobs, deliveries, construction. Our savings ran out. And then... He didn't complete the sentence. He didn't need to. Helen could see the rest of the story in his eyes, in the silent gratitude for a roof over his head, in the way he protected Mia every moment. This ends today, she said firmly. You'll never go without again. Robert looked at her, a complex expression on his face. I don't want your charity, Helen. I never wanted money or favors from anyone. I just wanted your father back, she completed, her voice choked. And I want my father back. It's not charity, it's amends for all the lost time. Mia approached, looking curiously at Helen, who now had tears streaming down her face. Why are you crying? The little girl asked. Helen smiled through her tears, not knowing how to explain. Robert pulled his daughter closer. Mia, remember I told you about a princess I met a long time ago? The little girl nodded, her eyes wide. The princess who had a big castle? Yes, he replied, looking at Helen with a sad smile. This is her. Helen is my daughter, your sister. Mia looked at Helen, dumbfounded. My sister? Really? Like in stories? Helen crouched down to the girl's height. Yes, like in stories. We're sisters. Mia smiled, a radiant and unreserved smile that made Helen feel something break inside her. A barrier she hadn't even known existed. So you're going to live with us now? The little girl asked. Helen looked at Robert, who seemed equally curious about the answer. Not exactly, she said. I have my job, my life in the city, but I can visit any time. We can be a family, even living in different places. Or you can live here with us, Mia suggested, pointing to the house. It's big and has a yard to play in. Robert blushed, embarrassed. Mia, don't be rude. The house is Helen's. She has her own life. Helen looked at the house, at the garden, where she had just planted sunflowers, at the man who was her father and the little girl who was her half-sister. For the first time in a long time, she felt exactly where she was supposed to be. Actually, I like Mia's idea, she said, surprising herself. This house has always been too big just for me. In truth, I hardly ever come here. Helen, you don't have to. Robert began. I know I don't have to. She interrupted. I want to. I want to get to know my sister. I want to make up for lost time with my father. I want to learn to be part of a real family. Mia clapped her hands, jumping with joy. We're going to be a real family, with Sunday dinner and everything. Helen smiled, feeling a simple, profound happiness she had never experienced before. so different from the cold satisfaction she felt closing a big deal or watching company stocks rise. In the months that followed, Helen reorganized her life. She didn't abandon the company. It was a part of her, of who she had become. But she delegated responsibilities, reduced her working hours, learned to say no to unnecessary meetings and yes to family dinners. Robert, with his characteristic dignity, refused anything that seemed like charity, but he accepted when Helen offered him a position in the logistics department of Thorn Group, precisely the sector he had helped found decades ago. His knowledge, despite the years away, was still valuable, and employees soon learned to respect that simple man who treated everyone from the janitor to the director with the same firm kindness. Mia enrolled in a good school, made friends, flourished like the sunflowers they had planted together that first day. Helen found herself fascinated by her sister, by her endless curiosity, her ability to see beauty in the simplest things. She began to see the world through the little girl's eyes and realized how much she had lost in her relentless pursuit of success. The house in Greenwich Heights came alive, laughter in the previously silent hallways, board games on Friday nights, pancakes on Sunday mornings, a tradition Robert resurrected from the days when Helen was a child. It wasn't perfect. There were difficult days. Helen still carried the weight of the lies, the absence, the lost time. She still caught herself questioning if all of it was real, if Robert didn't harbor resentments too deep to be overcome. He, in turn, struggled with a feeling of inadequacy in the face of his eldest daughter's sophisticated world. But day after day, they chose to start over. They chose to trust. They chose to build something new on the ruins of the past. 6 months after that rainy night, Helen was in her office in the penthouse of the mirrored building that housed Thorn Group headquarters. It was past 9 at night, and the city glittered below, a carpet of light stretching to the horizon. On her desk, between contracts and reports, was a new photo frame. She, Robert, and Mia smiling. In front of a recently inaugurated building, the Aurora House, a support center for single parents and vulnerable children, a project she had created in silence, without media fanfare, without using the company's name. A place where broken families could find a new beginning. A place that offered not just shelter and food, but also vocational training, childcare, legal, and psychological assistance. Dozens of families had already passed through its doors and rebuilt their lives. At the celebration ceremony, Helen, Robert, and Mia stood side by side, greeting guests and dignitaries. The press covered the event, fascinated by the story of the powerful CEO who had reunited with her father after 25 years and together had created such a successful project. "Ms. Vance, what motivated you to create Aurora House?" a journalist asked, microphone in hand. Helen looked at Robert, who held Mia's hand, at the families circulating in the hall with stories of triumph in their eyes, at the dedicated team that worked day and night to make that place run. "I believe everyone deserves a second chance," she replied simply, "that the past doesn't define who we can be, and that family is something we can rebuild, even when it seems impossible." Later, when the guests had departed, Helen, Robert, and Mia walked through the center's garden. Sunflowers had been planted everywhere, their yellow faces turned toward the setting sun. "You know what I like most about sunflowers?" Robert said, as Mia ran ahead of them, chasing fireflies in the twilight. "It's not just that they follow the sun, it's that, even on the darkest nights, they're already positioned to receive the first light of morning, as if they knew with absolute certainty that the sun would return." Helen looked at her father, at the lines of expression on his face that told a story of loss, struggle, and unwavering hope. "Like you," she said, "all these years, you never gave up." Robert smiled, that smile she had kept in her memory even when she believed she hated him. "On you?" Never. Not for a second. That night, back at the house in Greenwich Heights, the house that had finally become a home, Helen found a box on her bed, a gift from Robert. Inside, there was an old photo album. Photos of her as a child with her parents, moments she believed lost forever. "How did you?" she asked when she found him on the porch. "I kept them in a box I left with a friend before your mother could throw them away. I always believed that one day you'd want to see them." Helen leafed through the album with reverent care. Photos from a time when they were a family, when the future was still a promise, not a scar, when she was still just a little girl, not the heiress of an empire built on lies. The last photo showed Helen at 6 years old, sitting on her father's shoulders, laughing as if the world were a safe and good place. On the back, in Robert's handwriting, a single sentence: "To Helen, life is a circle. We always return to where we're meant to be." She closed the album, feeling a peace she had never known before. The feeling that finally the pieces of her life had fallen into place, that the circle, somehow, was complete. On the horizon, New York City glittered under the fine rain, a sea of twinkling lights, the same rain that a year earlier had brought her father back into her life. The same rain that had washed away the past and made room for a new beginning. Mia appeared on the porch, already in her pajamas, her hair still damp from her bath. "Story time," she announced, pulling Helen and Robert by the hands. In the little girl's colorful room, sitting on the edge of the bed, the three of them formed a picture Helen had never imagined possible. A family, imperfect, mended, built on scars and second chances, but real as the rain outside, as the sunflowers in the garden, as the love that finally had found space to blossom. "What story are we telling today?" Robert asked, adjusting the blanket over Mia. The little girl yawned, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "The one about the princess who lost her king and then found him again." Helen smiled, exchanging a look with her father. That story, their story, had become Mia's favorite, a story of loss and reunion, of hidden truths and revealed ones, of a circle that against all odds had finally closed. "Once upon a time," Helen began, "there was a princess who believed her father, the king, had abandoned her." And as the words flowed, intertwining past and present, lie and truth, pain and healing, the rain fell softly outside, washing the world, preparing the ground for a new day, for sunflowers that, even in darkness, already know where to turn when the sun rises. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be remembered.